Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTN for tonight's coverage of the Season 10 finale here at the FATCH GT3 Championship live exclusively on TRTN. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here in Stavelot at the home of one of the most iconic tracks in mainland Europe, known the world over for its perilous ascent through turns 3, 4 and 5. Welcome to the largest of the Grade 1s here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Founded in 1921, comprised of 20 turns and a staggering 4.3 miles, that's just over 7 kilometres of FIA Grade 1, home of the Belgian Grand Prix in Formula 1, as well as seeing the Intercontinental GT Challenges Spa 24 hours and the FIA World Endurance Championships 6 hours of Spa. This circuit has become the de facto hub here in the westernmost parts of mainland Europe for all things endurance racing, and tonight we'll host the final round of Season 10. Last week saw Gianluca Canderella crowned its champion then, and taking a look back through the previous number of champions before him, he becomes the first ever Italian driver to take the championship here in FATCH GT and gives Ferrari their first championship since Matthew Williams' first of what later became a triple header in Season 5. Canderella then comes home with a victory after last week's round in the Circuit Snetterton over in Norfolk, England, Great Britain. Taking a look back through the previous wins this season then, Canderella back on winning form after a 2-week-long win drought courtesy of Giovanni Ciulla and Tyler Vermack. Heading in towards tonight's round then, looking at the championship standings here for Season 10. And at the head of the table then, having confirmed his championship at the end of last round, Gianluca Canderella stands tall with 347 points. Giovanni Ciulla returns to second with 253.5. Matthew Williams in third with 246.5 points. And then we find in fourth place Patrick Leger, also pronounced Patrick Leger, with 201.5 points. Ian McGowan rounds out the top 5 with 178.5 points. Niels Bassler with 174.5 points. And in a joint 7th then, Ken Thomas and Eric Stander, 163 points. Behind them, Jan Villenbos with 162 points, rounding out the top 10 then. And this is an ultra-tight back end of the top 10, I should point out here, as we find our drivers 1.5 points apart from one another, 4 positions in all, with Levi Warner at the back with 161.5 points. Taking a look then onto the calendar for today, of course, the final round of the championship right here in Spa. And conversely, taking a look from the look of things on that calendar, of course, shows that we are in the last of the 90-minute races today. We're in the midst of the last 10 minutes of free practice coming up around the corner, then 15 minutes of qualifying and 90 minutes of racing to wrap out the season. 1 mandatory pit stop in all for fuel at a 25-second fixed refueling window, and of course 1.5 times the standard lot of points for tonight's round. We continue to watch on board then with Niels Bassler. A look in towards balance of performance for today finds Mercedes with best advantage over any one manufacturer here, 8 kilos off of the AMG, and that's going to play wonderfully into the hands of a few drivers that we'll get on to talks of in just a moment. Looking elsewhere though, Lamborghini with 3 kilos shed away and into the positives right off the bat, then Ford and Aston Martin gaining 2, with Ford still harbouring a 19% engine restrictor. Up ahead of them, Porsche gained 5 kilos, Audi gained 6, BMW 7, Ferrari on your screens at the moment here, the 296 gaining 8 kilos, McLaren heaviest in class with an 11 kilo ballast. So as we take a look away then from Niels Bassler to see the current standing of things in tonight's round, Eric Stander stands as the fastest driver by 15 thousandths over Daniel Homoki, Tyler Vermack in third, Francesco Panabianco in fourth. It's only until we get to 5th and 6th where we start to see some changes here, as 2 drivers have played their joker in for tonight's round. Brooklyn Donkin from BMW to AMG, and Giovanni Ciulla going from Ferrari to Ford. You can only see it there just vaguely over the pit wall. Donkin has been out on track since the start of free practice nearly a full hour ago. Sadly, both of them will miss out on qualifying tonight because of their choice to go to a different manufacturer at the final round of the championship, meaning both Donkin and Ciulla will start from the back for round 10 of the championship. Taking a look further down the order, we also get to see a new driver onto the field here, Twijn Rietveld in the number 35. Here with Ferrari, currently level on time with Chris Harris in 8th place. Up and around Eau Rouge and Radion we go. Speaking of Eau Rouge and Radion, let's include it as part of an upcoming track tour then, as we go to catch on board with the nearest drivers down towards the line. I believe just ahead there of Nick Bright is Jan Villenbos, and we'll catch on board with both the 100 and the 36 for their unison run down the circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Starting things off then down at La Source, and normally what would start off the Belgian Grand Prix will only be the technically last corner before our start here with the GTs today, out through turn 1, now through to turn 2 as we head downhill in towards the dip that then gives rise to that climb uphill here on board with Jan Willem Bos as we ascend through turns 3, 4 and 5 at Eau Rouge and Radion. Arguably one of the most iconic straights of racetrack known the world over. Up and around turn 6 onto the Kemmel straight here with the number 100 Mustang as we continue down towards Lacombe and Melmedy. And this will represent a sizable opportunity for overtakes here down the Kemmel and in towards turn 7. A fairly sharp corner here, though not among the sharpest on this track. Down through to Melmedy now at turn 9 as we begin another run downhill. Now just over the crest and running down in towards Rivage, also called Bruxelles, depending on who you ask. Turn 10 here, this downhill open hairpin right brings us into a sharp left, also continuing to go downhill here at the no-name corner at turn 11. Following with Boss as we make our way down towards Pouhon, an area of the track that the Formula 1 cars of years gone by have been able to take flat out on a routine basis. Our GTs will try to tiptoe as close as they can to that, but of course limited by the technology of our time, and will have to lift on the run down through turn 12. Now towards turn 13 at Campus. Or turn 14 technically being what's called Campus, but we call this the Campus section. In towards Stavelot, turn 15. A little bit of a wobble there off the exit of turn 15, but there's plenty of catching there off the exit of that corner. In through to turn 16 now, plenty of runoff off the curb of Paul Frere as we begin our run into another high-speed section of the track, much like what we saw in Sector 1. Sector 3 gives us the run at Blanchemont. Up and around turn 17 and 18 then, and unlike the run of things around Pouhon, the drivers will be striving to take this one flat out. We see Jan Willem Bos lets Nick Bright go on by, so we go to catch on board here just before he makes his way to the line, down to the bus stop chicane. Also a heavy overtaking opportunity for drivers that we have seen on a routine basis to give us plenty of action here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Down towards the line then goes Nick Bright from 12th, stays there, 2:19.035 in the last lap just gone for our track tour of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Heading in towards the end then of free practice, Eric Stander still 15 thousandths clear of Homoki, Vermaak in third, Panabianco in fourth. And Panabianco, I must say, has got to be one of the unluckiest drivers I think I've ever seen this season. A driver that has had quite the bit of promise surrounding him, multiple podiums as well, but never quite at the top step. And when it's not been a podium, he has been annihilated by the hands of fate. It has been a very tough season here, but you've got to respect the commitment that goes in for the 667 to keep getting that back behind the wheel and keep rolling with the punches here. That is a proper trooper mentality from Francesco Panabianco, and more drivers ought to take in that kind of example, never to give up in spite of the odds. We see though down to 5th as Donkin goes 4th. Now optimistic signs here for one of the two jokers of tonight's round, as both he and Giovanni Ciulla lay in times capable of the top 10. While they'll both sit out qualifying with the prospect of 90 minutes of racing up and ahead of them, they've definitely got the pace making of a top 5 finish, and now they have 90 minutes to prove so over the course of the race ahead. Donkin then back into the pit lane after turn 6. Meanwhile, Giovanni Ciulla still idle in the pit lane. Niels Bassler nearest to the line from 8th place, 1.3 seconds off the mark, and stays there for the time being. As we head into the last minute and a half here of free practice before qualifying, 15 minutes of which for the last quali of the season. And after that, we've got plenty of exciting articles of news for the run in towards this last round of the championship. Of course, with Candarella already crowned its champion, the gloves are off for the rest of the field here, fighting for the remaining positions among that top 10. Of course, 1.5 times the current wad of points for tonight's round is going to make things rather interesting indeed. We'll catch back on then with Bassler towards the end of this session. Nearest to the line then, number 36, Nick Bright. In towards the bus stop chicane, behind him the number 100 of Jan Willem Bos. We watched on with these two for our track tour here of Spa. And our last visit to Spa was over on Season 6, Round 1 of the NLRL Sunday League powered by TRTM, which we went live with just about a week ago now. And if you caught on with us last night, you would have seen a hectic triple header in Indianapolis. The third round at Silverstone coming up this Sunday, 6:30 p.m. BST. Live exclusively on TRTN. We have plenty of exciting news to come surrounding our continued work here with FATCH GT A little more information on that, though, in the news segment later on today. As it stood to be the case, with only mere seconds away from it, these two still had enough time here to come out for one more flying lap. So next to catch on board with looks to be the number 24 here, Bas Peter Svim, on his way down through the turns 19 and 20 for Ferrari. Number 24 here, 14th in the session. Down to the line he goes. Right now only needs 7 thousandths over Jan Villenbos for 13th, but across the line he goes. Sadly couldn't yet find it here in free practice, but of course still 15 minutes of qualifying to follow along with it. So plenty of signs for improvement later down the line. Nearest, though, I believe here is going to be Daniel Hatton in the number 55 Ford, making his way down to the line here. Currently no time set for him. We'll see where he ranks in, though, across the line, and goes 19th. Number 23 from behind him, that being Niels Basler from 8th, and brings about the end of free practice.
Go, go, go.
15 minutes of qualifying then underway here for the final round of FATCH GT Season 10, and already movement there from Warner and Vermaak. We see up in front of them there, that's Sander Verstappen, is now taking a look further up the field. I believe it might just be there by a hair's width. Vermaak first among the fray. Of course, 2 weeks ago here in FATCH GT, in the wet race at Indianapolis, was a formidable drive here for Vermaak. And taking a look back through it, currently then 2 weeks since his last victory in this series. And if you joined us last night, Vermaak took 2 more victories in a wet Indianapolis at the triple header on the NLRL Sunday League. So this driver certainly with a point to prove this weekend. It's been a brilliant week for him so far. Sorry, I should say I kind of got a little bit jet lagged there because I forget we are in Monday, and well, that weekend behind was quite interesting. So had a point to prove over the weekend. Coming into the next week, I should say then, for Vermaak, still with a point to prove here. Making his way down towards Puan. Behind him, Levi Warner and Sander Verstappen. Whilst we wait for him to get around the track, then taking a look back into the timetable from free practice to give us an indication of what we're up against for tonight's round of the championship. So, of course, keeping an eye out there for Eric Stander, Daniel Homoki and Tyler Vermaak as your top 3 from before. Brooklyn Donkin and Giovanni Chula, while yes, 4th and 6th will not be seen qualifying today. So that does lend extra credence here to Francesco Panebianco to attain a top 5 start. When you consider he was only a few tenths away from Tyler Vermaak, there is still chances here for a perhaps front of second row or even front row start. Plenty more tricks up the sleeve then from the number 667. All to be revealed, though, in due time then. On board with Tyler Vermaak, down through to Blanchimont. So they're pointing out Levi Warner. Now 1.5 seconds is pumping the brakes there to build somewhat of a gap. He's actually letting Sander Verstappen out in front of him, trying to build a distance away from the 888 here. He'll be the first driver on towards qualifying today. And Vermaak will have that added benefit of far less traffic in front of him, being first out among the fray, jumping the gun off the rest of the drivers here, down through to La Source. While he was 3rd in free practice, I'd say there is still definitely a few hundredths of a second to be found there for the 888. It's been a formidable presence, albeit a short presence in Season 10. After a late entry to the series and a win in Indianapolis, it's going to be curious to see what he makes of tonight's grid. Of course, with no championship prospects in sight, this is right in his element then. Vermaak has been quite vocal to us on his sort of, not, I wouldn't necessarily say disdain, but disinterest with championship titles. He is a driver motivated purely for the love of the game, of just racing itself. But as we mentioned last night over on the Sunday League, with how competitive he's been, it's very hard to present a case that he's very apathetic towards championships when he drives like a champion in his own respect. So looking in towards tonight's race, he really doesn't seem to be pumping the brakes in light of more casual air around this final round. He is still willing to give it all gas, no brakes for the run to the final checkered flag of the season. He makes his way down through the no-name corner, up towards Puan now at turn 12. That McLaren is just looking absolutely planted in this section. We saw it was quite a considerable bit of lift from Ford, but the McLaren lower center of gravity, a little further back as well, greater center of rotation, and it's just on rails down through this winding middle and final sector. And that's really one of the great mysteries surrounding Spa. It's what makes it such a brilliant challenge for drivers as part of what I would say is up there with endurance racing royalty. The Spa 24 Hours, I would say, being up in the same regard as the Le Mans 24 Hours, Daytona 24 Hours, and N24. Some of the best endurance races going. And that's because Spa, of course, originally designed for Grand Prix racing, has plenty of the amenities surrounding it, but to set up a GT car to do what a Formula 1 car can do without even breaking a sweat requires such great aptitude of mind and machine to know what the car needs here. You need to have a perfectly balanced setup for this track. We've seen plenty of tracks present the same argument. Down towards the line then for Mack, our first time onto the charts. 2:17.877. It is a formidable open then for the McLaren. Across the line from behind him goes Sander Verstappen and Levi Warner. Warner goes fastest though by 0.2 of a second, 2:17.630. Number 279 across the line from behind him. That was for Simon Byrne. Behind them, Chris Harris goes fourth. From behind them, I believe that is Jan Willem Bos. That it was. Number 100 across the line. Then we see the new driver on the block there, that being Reitfeld. The number 35, I believe there's sadly no time set for Twan Reitfeld. Veld, I should say. So the soft V from us there. And we see Eric Stander now goes fastest. And look at the gap indeed there between those two Fords. 5 thousandths. And Panabianco now fastest by 0.3. So we did say there before, despite a P3 at the end of free practice, there was definite upside potential off of that Mercedes. And if this is ever to be around where he could finally break what has been a season-long curse here, now would certainly be the time for Francesco Panabianco. And the charge towards a possible victory has never looked more satisfying given the hardships he's gone up against week on week here in Season 10 of FATCH GT. In spite of multiple podiums, still eludes a race win here. But tonight could be the night all of that changes. We've said that far too many times. Now we really do believe it. Daniel Homoki, second fastest for Porsche. Played his joker earlier in the season. And that move away towards Porsche has paid heavy dividends for him in tonight's round. He was looking very confident for the run in through towards today's event. Before we went live, he was actually among the fastest, if not the fastest time of the session. So only very recently was he dethroned from that. There is definitely some great potential surrounding that 444 in tonight's event. Nearest to the line then, number 11. We go to catch on board here, Daniel Marquez with Ferrari. Then from behind him, the 888 of Tyler Vermack. You also see joining into the session there. Of course, last week saw him as the champion here of Season 10, but Gianluca Candarella is on the grid for today's round. Across the line then, Marquez. Sadly, no time set for him, so we'll go to catch back on board with the 888 Vermack. Now washed away to the top 5. We'll see, though, can he return to it with flying colours? There was an improvement, but sadly not enough for sizable grounds there for Verstappen. Quite the contrary, 9th to 6th. Number 660 nearby, so here comes Chris Harris. A driver that has really delivered on, I would say, quite an understated performance. It's been great from him, very consistent, very well-rounded drive this season. And this is the cherry on top, because look at that, look at, I'm just trying to get quite gauge on that, 400ths of a second. Second place, of course, 900ths from the leading position. And Eric Stander now joins the fray once again, 32 thousandths away. From behind him, I believe that was, yes, Levi Warner, last season's champion, a multiple-time champion here in FATCH GT. And in chat at the moment, we're hearing there questions from, I believe that's from Christian LeBay, multiple-time champion over on Competizione Performance League. Yes, it is the final round today here of FATCH GT Season 10. It's been a long road we've travelled on with the folks here on FATCH GT, our first season covering racing from these folks, and it has been one of the best we've ever taken on. So hoping towards a bright future, and we may have a word or two more on that over the course of the news segment, so do tune in for that in about 7 minutes time. That's about how long we've also got left here of qualifying, with Warner currently in 5th. Recent improvements then saw Harris and Stander, components of the top 3. Panabianco now, as it stands then, loses ground from that fastest time by half a second. Daniel Homoki back on leading form for Porsche. And taking a look then back through the previous wins this season, we've still yet to see a win for Porsche this season, so there is still absolutely the chances here of a breakaway. Up over Eau Rouge and Radion. 4 litre flat 6. A proper soundtrack here of GT racing. I should clarify there, not a 4 litre, it's actually up to a 4.2 litre over the previous generation. Slightly bigger engine though, but that car still an absolute juggernaut in the world of GT racing. Number 12 then, Eric Stander back out on track, scorned away from that front row, and we see getting closer to him is Chris Harris, now only 28 thousandths away after his last lap just gone. Now places him ever closer to the half-second margin. Right now, not a single driver holds it to Daniel Homoki. These three far closer to each other than either of them are to Daniel Homoki up in front. And now we see the introduction there of Levi Warner to become the first driver to break within half a second of that new fastest time. Warner now 435 thousandths away from Homoki at the lead of this qualifying session. 5 minutes left to go. And still more times rolling in. Number 36 across the line from behind him, the 24, I believe there, the 315, my mistake there. And looking from behind him, the number 8 as well. You see of the latter, Ken Thomas in the top 10. You now get to see also, some time ago there, number 35 with a time on the charts here, Twan Rydveld. New driver on the block here for round 10 of season 10. The number 35, as it stands to be the case then, only 93 thousandths away from Ben Cheeseman in the number 420. And I believe now, you know, I think this seems a little on the nose here, but is that not the colours of Vodafone McLaren? I haven't had the opportunity to speak too much to Ben Cheeseman, but if I had to gauge, he might be somewhat of an old school McLaren fan here. Because that are the very distinct colours, or those are the very distinct colours of Vodafone McLaren. The chrome and red still would hold the cards there as probably one of the best McLaren liveries since the Marlboro era. But I will say, definitely did have a soft spot for the, I think it was the 2021 McLarens. That sort of bright blue with the papaya orange. Was quite a fan of that one. Nonetheless, though, Cheeseman, 7th in the session. Away from the talk on liveries, taking a look back in here to see Panabianco to the line. Can he make the improvement back up towards the front row or even to pole position across the line? He goes, sadly, not on this occasion. From behind him was Daniel Hatton, currently 18th. Number 60, nearest to the line, Sander Vesteker, just outside of the top 10 here, 11th, and across the line stays there for the time being. And behind him, the 660, so we see approaching the line there was Chris Harris, stays in 5th place at the moment. Number 100 and number 35 across the line, so for Jan Willem Bos and Twan Rydveld. That's 12th and still, as it stands here, 8th place for Rydveld. Number 1 across the line, Levi Warner still holds on to that 435 thousandth margin. 916 nearest the line. Bas Delsman. We've got news as well to hand, as we just saw from behind him was Nick Bright to 6th place there, Ford 4, 5 and 6 inside of that top 10. Currently they hold 40% of the top 10 for Ransom as the most populous manufacturer of the top 10. But they joint second from behind them between McLaren and Ferrari. We've got word from race control that yes, Candarella has returned to the field, though his aspirations seem to be that he'll be starting by his own volition here from the back alongside his teammate Giovanni Ciulla and the Phoenix Racing team, of course one of 2 jokers in tonight's round. Now I believe as well, and this wasn't documented to me at the time, but it did have a bit of a hunch to me here that John Williams has also played as Joker, though not officially reported in any of the communications channels relevant to the Joker. So I think he's come away from Ferrari here to Ford, much like what we've seen for Giovanni Ciulla, and he will also sit out this qualifying session, which seems to be very much so the case now, with only 2 minutes left to go and still no appearance on track. Brooklyn Donkin, of course, we saw was a fixture of the top 5 at the end of free practice. Certainly has the pace for it today. Very capable talent from the Euro Titans endurance team, now moving to Mercedes for the last round after a limited appearance in the latter half of season 10. Homoki still fastest, but Stander now second. Levi Warner back into the pit lane then, beyond the point of no return, so we'll have to hold his guns here and hope that he can stay third by the end of this session. Panabianco to the line, squashes that hope immediately then. From behind him, Daniel Hatton goes up a few positions there to 15th. Still has plenty of time then for one more lap. Number 60, nearest to the line, Verstecke, 12th, stays there. Number 660, approach to the line, Harris from 5th, stays there. From behind him, Daniel Homoki. New fastest time then, 2:16.445 then by Daniel Homoki. And this has been a formidable qualifying session indeed off of the 444. A fantastic session at hand. The new fastest lap then, 2:16.445. Who yet stands to try and dethrone him from this pole position? Could it be Stander? Could it be Panabianco? Plenty of times still left to be set in here. Nearest to the line, number 36, Nick Bright from 6th, stays there. From behind him, I believe that is Bas Delsman. Yes, now 17th. Number 8 from behind them, Ken Thomas, 12th. Back into the pit lane, it goes 888. Tyler Vermack back out on track. Of course, won a few weeks ago in Indianapolis, won last night over on the Sunday League. Also in Indianapolis, very similar conditions, as a matter of fact, between those two races. Now we are beyond the point of no return for any further occurring laps here. We're at the end of qualifying, so first driver to finish this qualifying session appears to be that of Mario Rutias. Behind him, the number 12 of Eric Stander. Down through to Blanchimont then, currently 19th in the session. And with the reintroduction then of Gianluca Candarella, which I've been told, sadly, we won't be able to get an interview off of him today. But we may have more interviews in the future, as continued collaboration still in the talks here with FATCH GT over the introduction of a dedicated interviewee system for any prospective future events. Again, still have to wait until the end of qualifying to talk about this. Across the line, Rutias to 19th, stays there. Number 12 across the line. Can Eric Stander do it? 535 thousandths needed, and across the line, sadly, no improvement. Now, final blow here from the 667. Francesco Panabianco tries to go to the pit lane there and nearly assassinates a marshal. Number 55, nearest to the line. Here comes Daniel Hatton from 15th. Can he find himself further up from 15th place across the line? Goes to 13th. Number 60 nearest. Sandro Verstecke now down a position, is back into the pit lane. And approaching the line there, I believe, is the 660. Chris Harris across the line. From behind him, Daniel Homoki still stands as the fastest time of the session. Number 100 nearest. Number 36 aborting the flying lap. Now all it rests on the number 23 and 24 on this grid. Niels Baslier, brand new livery, worth pointing out there, away from the black and turquoise. Now back in with, and I'm no expert on Ferraris here, but if I had to start naming colours, I'm pretty sure we're looking here at somewhere between... No, that's definitely a Rosso Corsa, not Rosso Scuderia. That would be far too bright. And that looks to be more than classical colours here for that Ferrari. In its natural habitat then. Baslier, though, aborting the flying lap and will stay 9th at the end of today's session. Daniel Homoki on pole position then for round 10 of FATCH GT Season 10, the final round of the championship, and Porsche on pole, Stander in 2nd, and Panabianco 3rd, Warner 4th, Harris rounds out the top 5. We'll get a full read through of the grid in a moment's time. And now, as we head away from qualifying, if you are currently yet to have watched the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500, I would recommend clicking away for the next couple of minutes here, as the new segment will discuss the Indy 500 that went on last night on Sunday, the 24th of May, 2026. We'll give you a few moments just there as we wait for the grid to form at the end of the paddock here. It has been quite the qualifying session at hand. So, heading in towards the talks of the news today, and from the Indianapolis 500, it was Felix Rosenqvist who won the 2026 Indy 500, the 110th official running of the Indy 500, in a record closest finish between himself and David Malukas. The final margin there was 0.0233 seconds. Now, it's worth considering the previous record that was held at the time between Al Unser Jr. and Scott Goodyear at the 76th running of the Indy 500 in 1992 was 0.043 seconds. So this is coming down even further. The next record that could ever come up after this will be so close, not even the officials will know who actually won that race. But it was such a great performance there by Rosenqvist and Malukas, all the way to the line, the closest ever finish to the Indy 500 in history. And away from talks then of real-world motorsports in towards the virtual world, as we have news from ourselves here over on TRTN. One of the latest bits of news then, we've signed a contract with the Continental Racing League to cover Season 2 of their GT3 Championship live from June 20th next month at 7 PM BST. Continental Racing League becomes the 8th league to join TRTN's summer roster after the Orange Line Racing League replaced MSC on our current summer roster. Meaning that, taking a look just briefly back in to what you'd expect to see over the course of the season at large, heading in towards the summertime, you'll be able to catch action from VSR, NLRL, FATCH GT, Orange Line Racing, High Caliber Community League, the Racing Club, Competizione Performance League, and now the Continental Racing League, live exclusively here on TRTN. Our final article of news then pertains to our event right here in FATCH GT, and it's confirmation we've got from Race Control and are happy to relay to you now. Season 11 is in the works. Sign-ups will be coming up in the next couple of days exclusively for the first few days for FATCH GT members of the Discord server. So if you want to get early in on the sign-ups for Season 11, you'll know where to find them over at the FATCH GT Discord server. And this has been fantastic news then. We will be able to get a follow-up here to Season 10's brilliant wad of action with Candarella now its defending champion. And we have confirmation to you now that TRTN will be the official broadcast provider of FATCH GT Season 11. More action to follow then. It's going to be one hell of a ride here to bring us to the end of Season 10. With the road ahead, no current confirmation on a starting date off of Season 11, but it will be hopefully sometime sooner rather than later. Taking a look then onto the grid for the last grid of the season. 90 minutes of racing here in the circuit at Spa-Francorchamps. We'll take a look at the regs in a moment's time, but before we do, it's Daniel Homoki on pole position with Eric Stander in second. Francesco Panebianco makes third place ahead of Levi Warner in fourth. Chris Harris rounds out the top five for Ford. Nick Bright in sixth place with Tyler Vermack in seventh. Ben Cheeseman in eighth, Niels Basler in ninth, and Twan Rietveld on his debut to FATCH GT Season 10 in 10th place. Jan Willem Bos in 11th with Ken Thomas in 12th, Daniel Hatton in 13th with Sander Verstekke in 14th, Bas Pietersveen in 15th with Guy Spruce in 16th, Bas Delsman in 17th, Daniel Marquez in 18th, Mario Rutias in 19th, and Brooklyn Donkin rounds out the top 20 after playing his Joker. Also playing the Joker then John Williams and Giovanni Chula starting 21st and 22nd, and by his own volition starting from the back, Season 10's champion Gianluca Candarella. And so, key players to watch out for here. Daniel Homoki, Eric Stander, Francesco Panebianco, Levi Warner, and Chris Harris. That entire top five here, all gunning for additional successes in this season. In the case of taking a look back through the last couple of wins here, only, actually, no, it stands to be the case where neither of this top five have ever seen a race win here in Season 10. I did have to double check on that because I could have sworn we have saw one from Warner. No, that would have been last season. All five of these drivers yet to have seen a win, and that actually makes the top six when you include Nick Bright. It's Tyler Vermack who becomes the first in that top 10 spray at the moment to have taken a win this season, having done so in Indianapolis. Ben Cheeseman in 8th place with Basler in 9th. Rietveld, keeping an eye on him there on his first ever race here, makes a top 10 start, not too shabby whatsoever. Taking a look to the back of the field then, all of our Joker starters from the 17, the 923 and the number 10, as well as the now drivers champion, Gianluca Candarella. First driver to win a championship with Ferrari since Season 5 from Matthew Williams. As we get up into the 30-second warning, you'll hear in a moment's time, we'll go to catch on board with Daniel Homoki.
30 seconds.
30-second warning given, so the driver's now instructed to fire up their engines. We're on board here with Daniel Homoki, your pole sitter for round 10 of FATCH GT Season 10, the last round of the season here. And as we wait for the drivers to get away onto the field, taking a look then onto the regulations one last time, as we see now, away from 15 minutes of qualifying, coming up in just a moment's time, 90 minutes of racing here in the circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, home of the Belgian Grand Prix, with a single mandatory pit stop enforced for fuel at a 25-second fixed refueling window. 1.5 times, of course, the standard amount of points for tonight's round. And now going to catch back on board with our drivers at the head of the field then. On board with Daniel Homoki, leading the charge down through to Eau Rouge and Radion here on the formation lap. So a lot of pressure here riding on the line for Homoki. Some serious promise behind his move to Porsche this season. Same is the story there of Eric Stander starting on the front row alongside him. Now on the run up through this first sector, that Porsche is going to be incredibly vulnerable. We do have word there from the pit lane. Ben Cheeseman is starting from the paddock, and I believe, and this is at least according to a testimony from Cheeseman himself, he may or may not have, now not saying anything, but may or may not have been distracted. May or may not have. Regardless, though, the 420 will start from the back. Otherwise, would have been 8th place on the race start. We'll see, though, how he gets on over the course of today's session. And to be fair, when you consider lap 1 calamities, this track is rife among them for trouble. We have seen issues here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in the last couple of runs around this circuit. It can be quite a treacherous run uphill for the first time. Of course, we don't start down on the main straight like we see in Formula 1. We don't start off on the run in towards La Source. We actually start after it for the run down towards Eau Rouge and Radion. So there's very little, if any, escape window here, because we do start out on a corner where, judging off the speed they're rolling away from, they will be able to take flat out. It does make this one of the more electric starts we've seen of any of the Grand Prix racetracks that we are able to race at here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. Looking further down the line then to see with a few other drivers. Gianluca Candarella, of course, the first Italian driver ever to take the championship here in FATCH GT, starts nearly as it would stand plumb last. But after that pit lane start for Ben Cheeseman, he is up an extra position now to what is going to be, once the lights go green and we go racing, 22nd. Right now staring up the back end of his teammate. Brand new vehicle for round 10, Giovanni Ciulla. Now with Ford, as we go to try and catch on board with him here. Taking a look in to see brand new toy here for the number 10. Ciulla has been a great drive over the course of this season. We'll see what he can make of things then with the 7th generation Ford Mustang. Making his way down through in towards campus. Anna Bianco still hunting down a race win. We made the claim earlier in this broadcast he's been one of the unluckiest drivers of the season, and I think that precedent still stands here. But even in spite of how many times he's been knocked down, this driver will always get back up. And that's the kind of commitment that now more than ever could reward him in the long run. Only 2 drivers stand up in front of him for the start of this race, Eric Stander and Daniel Homoki. The Mercedes remains confident in its ability to match them both. We'll see, though, over the course of round 10 how he gets on. Cheeseman starting from the paddock then. Still, I must say, one of the best liveries on this grid. No offence to anyone else, but just got a bit of a soft spot there for the Vodafone McLaren colours. I would say the FATCH GT colours are warming up to me here. Oh my goodness, who was that? I think that was... Was that Ken Thomas? Barreling his way up through... No, it was Vermac. Vermac barreling his way up through the field there. For a very vibrant charge up the order. Back on board then with the 444, Daniel Homoki, within a chance here of a race win today, but he's got to fend off the rest of the grid for an hour and a half's worth of racing. Here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, we make our way from turn 20 down towards turn 1, not yet to start the race right away here. A symphony on 6, 10, 8 and 5. Not 5 cylinders. We have no inline 5s on this grid. My mistake. Regardless, a symphony on cylinders down to the line. Trying to make that sound a lot cooler than it actually was. In towards the last round of the championship here. FATCH GT Season 10, Round 10. 90 minutes at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, home of the Belgian Grand Prix. Is officially underway. We're green and racing here in Spa. A brilliant start right off the bat there from Eric Stander, right up to the rear quarter of Daniel Homoki. But you see there, spiraling out wide went one of the Fords right off the bat then in towards Eau Rouge and Radion. Could have ended a lot worse, but as far as starts go here at Spa, not too shabby whatsoever. Watch here with Francesco Panebianco, who now spirals up right onto the rear end of Eric Stander as he charges up towards Daniel Homoki. Meanwhile, you saw behind them snaking their way around onto the Kemmel Straight was the rest of the grid side by side between Panebianco and Stander. Homoki continues to hold ground. Further down the line here, we see for Ken Thomas, alongside him Daniel Hatton, who has a drive-through penalty for a starting infraction. We see damage already, though, for Stander. It was Warner who had trouble, I believe, off of that race start. Now sandwiched in and amongst them on the run down towards Bruxelles here, side by side with the number 8. We follow with Ken Thomas, just stray of the top 10 here, with Warner now on his inside in towards turn 11. Running out wide there, so early door troubles here for Ken Thomas. Now side by side with Sander Verstecke. We see here for Gianluca Candarella pressed right up to the back end of Daniel Marquez, who is in turn right on the back end of Bas Delsman. It's contact between the pair of them out of Pouhon. The 828 surfs on through, much to the chagrin there, as yellow flags rain down at turn 12. Bas Delsman spun around by Daniel Marquez. In towards campus we go then. We see in behind them John Williams and Guy Spruce, as well as Mario Rutias following, as up in front, having broken away from the pack here. You see now pursuing his efforts on Ken Thomas is Brooklyn Donkin in the number 17 Mercedes AMG. Catching back up through the order though, because things are looking hot up here right at the head of the field. Going on board to find then with, if we can locate them at this time, as it's a tremendously large grid here, the fight for the lead. Eric Stander versus Daniel Homoki, and they look to go nearly side by side in towards the bus stop chicane. Porsche later onto the brakes. Ford charging right up and alongside them, who have more momentum off the exit. It will be Panebianco, who now charges up alongside Eric Stander. Watching here with the Mercedes, who has front row tickets to this fight for the lead, now finds himself as a fixture among it. We have yellow flags out. The number 23 in trouble, and it's contact down through La Source between our leading 3. Vermaak joins the fray here from 4th, right onto their rear bumper. And watching here as they're packed in like rush hour traffic. The number 12 slithers up in front of the 667 up through Eau Rouge and Radion. The Mercedes caught in the dirty air, forced to run wide, nearly clips that inside wall. Still holds his momentum, though. That's a bit of a questionable take of things. Nonetheless, Panebianco keeps his foot buried in the floor to stay up and alongside that of Eric Stander. Right behind, you can see there, Tyler Vermaak was trying to poke his nose out in the fray here, and into the wall goes the pair of them as it was contact from behind. I think we missed a tiny part of that there, where I think as the cameras cut away, you can see with Vermaak trying to go in, and they're vigorously defending, was turned into the wall. And then you see him bounce back and away and clatters Vermaak in towards Lacombe and Melmedy. Big hit between those two. On board here with Francesco Panebianco as the number 12 of Eric Stander is now back into the pit lane. That could be the end of the road here and what has been a very sour turn to round 10. Panebianco still holds on, but as it stands to be the case, Eric Stander in, Daniel Homoki still in the lead. Eric Stander being promoted to first because he's come into the pits ahead of time. That'll since change when they come back across the start-finish line. Homoki leads over Panebianco. Harris now third place, worth pointing out, with Bright behind Rietveld. I dare say it, he's in the top 5. Twan Rietveld made his debut on this round tonight here at FATCH GT. Started 10th, up 5 positions in the first 10 minutes. I believe there may have been a little bit of an error with our timing equipment. I will have to quickly rectify that myself. It shows the timers are much faster than they actually are there. We don't have an hour and 10 minutes left to go. As a matter of fact, we've only been through 5 minutes of the race itself, so do just give us a moment whilst we try to correct that ourselves. Regardless, though, on board with Twan Rietveld behind him, or I should say ahead of him, is Brighton Harris fighting for that third place spot up in front. Panebianco versus Homoki behind them. Warner versus Boss. I believe that should be the timing sorted as we should be able to get it going now. Yes. So we are a few seconds short of that. That's a bit of a mess up on our end. I think it was a typo. So, fun fact, we have to enter our timing equipment in seconds rather than minutes. And having a glance in here, oh my god, never mind. A huge hit between Sander Verstappen and Giovanni Chula. And it's worth pointing out here, in the case of Chula, also started from the back, carving his way up through the order, but that's big trouble for him as he clatters the number 60, now rejoining up in front of Mario Rutias in towards Rivage. So back on, just quickly, the context of it, the reason why our timing equipment was messed up there, I believe it's 5,400 seconds and we entered 4,500. So tiny change there in the order of the numbers has changed our timing equipment drastically because we have to calculate on seconds. That's our mistake and we'll own up to that one. But unfortunately then, oh my goodness, who was that in the wall? That's the 35, that's Twan Rydveld. The newcomer to the grid there, caned the wall at a tremendous speed. I mean, look at this on the replays here. I think his throttle was stuck in. I mean, watch it. Oh my word. That is indicative to me that his throttle is stuck on. Oh, yeah, we see there. Yeah, his throttle is stuck. So the car's just accelerating exponentially. And right now, it's just being dragged alongside the wall. Yeah, sadly, a bitter, bitter end to today for Twan Rydveld. He had a great opening to this race. And within the first 5 minutes, no less than the first 10, he was up 5 positions from 10th. And that's a bit away for things to end for him here. So I think here we're about 6 seconds short of the actual time. Still watching on then with Francesco Panebianco versus Daniel Homoki. These two in the clear, away from the rest of the grid by 2.1 seconds, with Harris in third, up over Eau Rouge and Radion. The Porsche showing signs of struggle. Looking further down the order then, as we get closer to the first 10 minutes of racing. So, of course, watching on here, Homoki leads over Panebianco. Harris in third, Bright fourth, Warner in fifth. And having a look here, it's a huge block of Fords coming down from third to seventh there. Third, Ford, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The Ford Motor Company. Behind them, Brooklyn Donkin with Mercedes in eighth. Gianluca Candarella in hot pursuit then from ninth. Ken Thomas in 10th. Bas Peter Svim in 11th. We see Sander Verstappen in 12th, Mario Rutias in 13th, John Williams from behind him in 14th, pursuing for 13th, looking for the inside down at Rivage. Otherwise, Bruxelles here at turn 10. They rub doors on the run down through turn 10. Great move, though, for Williams. A little bit argy-bargy there, but he's getting his elbows out in the early minutes of this race. Behind him now is Rutias, but also Niels Baslier, Guy Spruce, Tyler Vermack, as it stands to be the case then, with significant damages. The 888 in trouble. Ben Cheeseman in the number 420. Also, the little bit of damage here. Of course, these two teammates and the 5-star esports team. Bas Delsman in 19th. Daniel Hatton in 20th. 21st then for Daniel Marquez. And a reluctant end to today's race here for both Rydveld and Stander. Looking back up through the order. The fight for the lead between Mercedes and Porsche. Ford charging on from behind. There is the possibility of an upcoming fight here between Chris Harris and Nick Bright. The 660 and the 36 from behind them, Levi Warner and Jan Willem Bos. I'd say even getting closer to the opportunity here. Candarella v Donkin for 8th. Behind them, Thomas versus Peter Svim for 10th. Let's got a catch on board, though, with these two here. Things are looking to hot up in the competition between the 17 and the 828 for 8th place on the grid so far. These two having started from the back, so a tremendous turn in fortune for these two here. Brooklyn Donkin in the number 17, defending away 8th place from Season 10's Drivers' Champion, Gianluca Candarella. .3 litre naturally aspirated Mercedes AMG V8 engine from the SLS platform goes toe-to-toe with Ferrari's latest in V6 technology. The same underpinnings on that engine as what's used in the 499p hypercar, now 3-time consecutive Le Mans winner. Candarella seems to have the run here on Donkin, going for the inside, very late onto the brakes there, precisely held, and that's governed his performance throughout the season here. Candarella glides on past through Lacombe, now out through Melmedy, up and ahead of Brooklyn Donkin. But if we know a thing or two about Donkin in his last couple of performances, we know he's not the kind of driver to go down easy on an overtake. He will be swiftly recalculating a strategy for counter-attack here, but he is still bedding back in with Mercedes after spending significant time on this grid with BMW. We'll catch on with them a little later on. Looking back in then for Panabianco v Homoki, still within half a second at the front lines here as these two continue to break a line away. It is worth pointing out that gap, previously 2.1 seconds between themselves and Chris Harris, has now come down half a second to 1.6 seconds. Up through to turn 16, the curve of Paul Frere in towards Sector 3 proper as we head up to Blanchemont. And the Fords are reeling in the leading duo. Looking further around the field then to locate any further fights. Of course, now seeing the other angle of the leading fight of this race. Having a look in, though, to see Routiers versus Baslier right now in progress. Two Ferraris at war for 14th. On board with Mario Routiers. Niels Baslier right on his rear bumper as we make our way up towards Blanchemont. Behind them, Guy Spruce and Tyler Vermack. Side by side between the 23 and the 315. In towards Blanchemont. The 23's forced back in behind. The 315 runs a little bit wide there. These two going side by side on the run up towards the bus stop chicane. Who dares break latest here? Last of the late breakers. The 315 holds his ground. Very well held there by Routiers in his defense of 14th. Looking back in to see other fights from across the field. Candarella now having broke 2 seconds away from Donkin after his overtake for 8th place. Now has 2 seconds between himself and his contemporary at the Phoenix Racing team. Now driving for Ford in this round after playing as Joker. Also having started from the back, Giovanni Ciulla in 7th. Watching from Guy Spruce's point of view, of course, was not too far away from the previous fight we just saw between Routiers and Baslier. Heading up over a Rouge and Radio. He's got front row tickets to this fight. We'll see if we can go and catch on boards with that of Niels Baslier in a moment's time. We see here for Bas Peter Sveen. Fighting at the moment with Ken Thomas. Ferrari really seem to be at war mostly with themselves here, going in towards Lacombe. Baslier on the inside, but the back end steps away from him and he so nearly snaps it in towards the 315. That is the double-edged sword that is the Ferrari 296. A formidable machine since its introduction, a worthy successor of the 488, but my goodness, does it like to snap, and snap hard it does. Routiers runs deep through turn 10. It allows the 23 of Baslier to go the long way around. It's contact. Has turned around. Goes Niels Baslier. Clatters the wall. Minor damages in all there, but for the two-time champion, quite the fair bit of shell shock after what looked like a very well laid-in overtake. Now, word from the 916, Bas Delsman is into the pit lane. An emergency stop for car number 916. And gathering himself then in the fog of war, we see that Baslier has lost ground off to Tyler Vermack, and now sandwiched in between his previous fight between himself and Routiers is Ben Cheeseman in the number 420 McLaren. We see now from the pit lane here, two Fords out of this race, Eric Stander and Bas Delsman. We also saw one of the Ferraris out not too long ago, that being Rietveld on his debut. Looking here from Chris Harris, a budding prospect of this grid and getting closer to the leading duo. He may find himself a fixture of this leading fight not too far from now as we get closer into the first quarter hour of racing. We see, though, trouble for Bas Peter Sveen, as I'm told there. Yes, trouble for the number 100 as the yellow flags are out at La Source. Now back onto the track goes Bas Peter Sveen, but he's lost a lot of ground there now outside of the top 10. 12th as he drops in behind Sando Verstecke, just up in front of John Williams. Up through Rouge and Radion, but has the damage down at turn 1 affected his ability to take Rouge and Radion. There was quite a fair chunk of understeer for him at turns 4 and 5, but for the most part, the car still seems in at least a semi-operable condition, so you'd be able to hold on to that one here for a little while longer. With an hour and a half's worth of racing, it's worth considering here. We'll be seeing right now the scope of a 45-45 strategy, so drivers looking to gun for that single pit stop when there's about 45 minutes of racing left to go, splitting it directly down the middle. With some, though, in the case here of Jan Willem Bos, the damage could certainly bring them in a fair deal shorter, or sooner, I should say. Actually, just quickly staying on board here to see the fight between himself and John Williams. And as for the driver that we followed on board with over the course of the track tour here at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, in behind him, nearly collected a wall at Pouhon, was the number 923, John Williams. Looking to go and catch on board here with Ben Cheeseman, now having fallen in behind Mario Rutias at turn 12. McLaren still holding on, but of course he is nursing that front end damage. We'll see how long he hopes to hold on for here. Now taking a look at the lead of this race to find that Daniel Hamoki has now carved out a full second over Francesco Panebianco, who now seems to be hemorrhaging time, getting closer and closer to Chris Harris behind in third. On board with Mario Rutias, back in for the second chapter of what could be very many in his fight with Niels Basler, to find now he does find himself at the mercy of Ben Cheeseman, who is closing in on him. He's got radar lock in that McLaren and reeling him in by 0.4 of a second through Blanchimont as he clips over the curbs there. That could be further issues coming up here for Mario Rutias. Trying to defend away 17th place. Last time we caught on with him was during that incident off the exit of the no-name corner between himself and Niels Basler that saw the 23 spun around into the wall. Making our way then up and through to turn 1 at La Source. Cheeseman still in hot pursuit. Taking a look then at the wider order of things, Daniel Hamoki leads over Francesco Panebianco. Chris Harris in third with Nick Bright in fourth. Levi Warner in fifth with Giovanni Ciulla in sixth. And Gianluca Candarella in seventh. These two having been part of that four-pack of cars that started right at the very back of the field. Not too far away from them then is Brooklyn Donkin in 8th place with Ken Thomas in 9th. Bas Petersveen in a super close fight here with Sander Verstecke in for 10th place. Let's go to catch on board if we can here. Just quickly seeing the end of possible fighting between Mario Rutias and Ben Cheeseman. Rutias tries to run things deep in towards Lecombe and Melmedy, but on the curbs clung to there, and the track dragged him in down at Lecombe and Melmedy. Let's go to catch on board, though, with the Lamborghini of Sander Verstecke, who looks to be knee-deep in action here. Going to locate the Lamborghini as the 420 now gets position on track. On with Verstecke. It's going to be an interesting one here for Sander Verstecke to see what he can make of things over the course of today's race. Right now then, stuck in on action, played his joker earlier this season, a move from Ferrari to Lamborghini, now goes toe-to-toe with the machine he used to drive. As up in front of him, two Ferrari 296s, courtesy of Ken Thomas and Bas Petersveen. Behind him, though, is Jan Willem Bos. We just had a glimpse there over the rear view. You can see that's how close the Mustang is at this time. Very, very close indeed to the Lamborghini. Right now then, these four find themselves as fixtures of a overall fight for 9th place. Locally, though, in the case here of Sander Verstecke, with side-by-side action in front between Ken Thomas and Bas Petersveen, he finds himself vulnerable on a fight for 11th place as Jan Willem Bos nips at his heels. But as we see spilling over from turn 20, firmly back into the fight for 9th. Two Ferrari side-by-side, Bas Petersveen on the right, Ken Thomas on the left, going in towards La Source, very deep on the brakes there for Bas Petersveen. That could invite in Sander Verstecke up towards 10th. Ken Thomas now holds 9th. Petersveen in 10th. Jan Willem Bos, as you can see there, is clinging right onto the back end of Sander Verstecke. These four all in contention for 9th place. Up the Eau Rouge and Rally, on we go. From behind them, we see John Williams being forced to cut over the chicane. There was actually Jan Willem Bos who loses ground. Up in front, though, side-by-side action once again on the inside there, being Ken Thomas, on the outside being Bas Petersveen, also late onto the brakes, trying to run things the long way around. He might just have this one here, and he's left the door just wide enough for the introduction of the Lamborghini of Sander Verstecke. The number 60 now clings on to what is going to be locally for him a fight of 10th place here with Ken Thomas, down towards turn 10. It's naive to not consider that right behind him is still Jan Willem Bos. You can see peering over his shoulder is John Williams. after his brief spat of oversteer here at Puon. He seems to be locking in now for a fight with the number 100, so looking to the road ahead here between Ken Thomas and Sander Verstecke as he looks to go the long distance in towards campus. Couldn't yet find the grounds for it, but it's worth the ambition in towards the run at Stavelo at turn 15. Having broke away from that field then, Bas Peter Sveen, having put nearly a full second there on Ken Thomas, who stands vulnerable to a 3-car pack behind him. Meanwhile, yellow flags out at turn 11. It's for the number 11 that has caught themselves in a spot of bother there. That I believe, yes, is Daniel Marquez in trouble at this time. Back on, though, for the fight here between Verstecke and Thomas as they rub doors in towards Blanchimont, catching a tiny fragment of the grass there that could still unsettle him. It's right behind there, collected by Jan Willem Bos. Hitting the wall goes Sander Verstecke as he's catapulted from turn 18, spins around facing the wrong way into turn 19. A disastrous turn of events there for Sander Verstecke. Ran out wide at Blanchimont in his efforts to rejoin. Just taps there on his rear right corner by that of Jan Willem Bos, the number 100 Ford. And that tiny, tiny little bit of contact was enough to unstable the number 60 by such a significant degree there. That's Sander Verstecke back into the pit lane for the time being. Homoki still leads here, but the latest fight amongst the top 5 emerges between the Fords here. Nick Bright versus Levi Warner. Out through the run at Melmedy into the gravel. And Bright, as quick as that fight started, now ends it. Behind them, Giovanni Chula versus Gianluca Candarella as they recently swap hands through Lacombe and Melmedy for 6th place. And I think for Candarella, going from a last to first here on this grid would really be just the cherry on top of what has been a brilliant performance for the Italian talent over the course of this season. Not to be overshadowed, though. Giovanni Chula has put on a royal show here to take to the Ford after a season in with Ferrari and still deliver much of the same performance he's governed in the 296. He's taken to that Ford like a duck to water. And so far, the number 10 still clings on to the 828. Further down the line then, Ken Thomas versus Jan Willem Bos. Up in front, down through turn 12. So of the current fights going on at the moment, Nick Bright versus Levi Warner, Chula versus Candarella, then further down the line, Bos versus Thomas versus Williams, as it happens to be the case there. John Williams joining the fray in his 923 Ford. See for Ken Thomas, though, and this was the same issue he was having in his fight previously with that of Sander Verstecke before their incident between Verstecke and Bos, is that front end, just that tiny bit of damage on a car as razor sharp as the Ferrari is doing quite a lot to upset him in terms of that cornering ability. Out through to Blanchimont. You see here the Ford still cannoning its way up to his back end. It's worth pointing out that even in spite of that 19% engine restrictor that would have brought their power down to roughly about 450 horsepower over 550, has done very little to actually upset Ford's overall power, because they still are geared up for a significantly higher top end. So if they're in the slipstream, they can more than definitely do it. Ben Cheeseman into the pit lane in the number 420 McLaren. Troubling open then for him. Started from the pit lane, back into the paddock 17th. That ongoing fight then between Thomas and Williams. Currently among the closest on track right now. Wrestling the curbs there. That Ford, quite the pavement prowler as it would be, because that Mustang, much like a lot of the front engine cars we find on this grid, and we've seen them over the course of this grid and many others over the last couple of months. Ford, Mercedes, I would even hazard a guess at Aston Martin, Bentley, Lexus. All of these cars have one thing in common, and they can absolutely powerhouse the curbs, and that's exactly what Williams has used to such great benefit here, and now find himself up at ahead of Ken Thomas down through Puon. Tyler Vermack right behind Ken Thomas at this time. The number 8 Ferrari still struggling with that damaged front aero. Bear in mind, though, I believe Vermack's still harboring damage himself. So down through towards Stavolo. You see the back end just twitching to come loose there on the 888. As the McLaren continues to pursue then the Ferrari of Ken Thomas in towards Blanchimont. We see here down at turn 17 and 18. Vermack looking for a possible lunge on the inside. What's the current going rates here for Ken Thomas? He stays onto the racing line down at turn 19. Vermack still pokes his nose there on the inside. Now to the outside at turn 20. We've seen moves like this done before, but he just didn't have the momentum on this occasion. But he may have it on the run down towards turn 1 at La Source. McLaren, very, very sizable acceleration over the Ferrari in towards La Source. But is Thomas setting Vermack up for a switchback? Sadly, needed a lot more rotation than the car would give him to make that one possible. Tyler Vermack up to 12th. Ken Thomas currently 13th. We see here Guy Spruce versus Niels Bassler on board then with the 323. Currently then in the fight for 14th place at Eau Rouge and Radion. As we are starting to notice here, 9:34 p.m. local time, lights firmly on the cars. We are heading swiftly into nighttime conditions here in Spa for the final round of the championship. So I suppose what better to go alongside what is the figurative sunset of this series than an actual sunset on track for these drivers today. Bruce losing ground off there to the number 23 of Niels Bassler. Going to check back in though, just briefly here to find Eric Stander is back out on track, miraculously enough. And number 12, in spite of being multiple laps down, is now back out on the circuit after what was a very sudden and controversial turn between himself and Tyler Vermack on the Kemmel Straight. Looking here for Nick Bright, latest in the iron sights then on Gianluca Candarella's radar for that control of 5th place. John Williams looking to a possible fight here with Tyler Vermack. Up in front of him though, Jan Willem Bos in his sights right now on the run up towards turn 1. Jan Willem Bos, like we saw for Ken Thomas, is also harboring front end aero damage. So his steering will be to some degree here a bit compromised over the other two behind him. Heading up through Eau Rouge and Radion, it is worth pointing out, just looking over his rear view to see just how close John Williams and Tyler Vermack are over the crest there at Eau Rouge and Radion. Let's got to catch on board if we can here with these two. Williams holding all the way to the inside. Vermack's got the momentum as he's gone out wide from turn 6 to try and hold as much ground he can as possible. And as it seems to be the case then, Ford for the very first time ever on our screens, I think, that's probably not the case, but still has been outran by McLaren. I wouldn't say their fight is quite yet over. Whilst he's got the position, now it's up to Vermack to keep it in his run up towards Jan Willem Bos in front. We'll catch on with these three a little later on, taking a look in to find, though, with that, if we can here, the Ferrari of Gianluca Candarella now sets his sights on Nick Bright for the last of those top 5 positions. We also saw into the pit lane a moment ago there went Ken Thomas to repair that front end damage on his Ferrari. Off by about 15 minutes on the midway strategy here, so that front end damage just a little too much to bear for the rest of his stint. Is in early, will still have plenty of fuel and time to come in to the last stint of the race here for an hour. Here we get to watch Gianluca Candarella in a bit of a foreign position to him here because he very rarely finds himself south of the top 5. Hunting down Nick Bright. Candarella had a formidable fight with Vladislav Mizin last week in Snetterton, so using some of that fighting experience with him, still fresh in the mind of Season 10's Drivers' Champion. He takes to the fight here, rising up through turns 3, 4 and 5, wrestling as Ferrari as he goes. Up in front, it's worth pointing out there, Ken Thomas emerging, with Levi Warner not too far away from him. There's a lot of dust there kicked up as the number 8 made its way back onto the track. The 36 holds middle ground, now the inside in towards Lacombe, back onto the racing line there, so good area denial. Bright using the size of his car to his benefit. Knowing that Mustang takes up a lot of space here on that track, so exactly the same story here. It's just cutting him off from an opportunity to go for the inside. Common misconception, though, with defending etiquette isn't necessarily to block your opponent off, because you can make the argument that would border on the line of moving under braking and such other illegal tactics. What it actually, I'd say the art of defending is to make overtaking so difficult it would risk their own neck. You're playing on the driver's sense of self-preservation, so to speak. And the rules do reinforce in a lot of motorsports championships that you can't go out of your way to just start swerving under the brakes and blocking drivers off, even if they've got you for the inside. You've got to make it as awkward as possible, and that's exactly what Bright's doing here to Candarella. The options have been there, but if Candarella went for them, it would have been suicide. It starts with area denial, and it ends with almost, I'd say, going onto the ground there and squeezing. But again, it's a very mushy line drawn in over what I would say is the artful side of defence and what borders on just breaking the rules. What we're seeing here, though, from Bright has been quite the textbook example, though, of a good defensive strategy. Because not many drivers... Oh, in the background there, that was Giovanni Ciulla and Ken Thomas. Oh, my goodness, what happened there between those two? Getting a look here on the replays as we continue to stay on board with that ongoing fight for 5th. So Thomas ran out wide in his efforts to rejoin. I don't think he was aware, per se, of the number 10. He was right onto his rear bumper. And there, I think Ciulla was just trying to go for the inside on him. Didn't realise that he was there and just ended up colliding with him. Not a great turn of events for them, no doubt. And that does push quite a few seconds away between Candarella and Ciulla. And in the early minutes of this race, Ciulla really had his trailer hitched here to Candarella to get up through that crowd. These two very capable drivers do play off of each other very, very well in this championship. That's why they find themselves at the lead of the championship standings over Matthew Williams on the run in towards tonight's round. You see there with Bright again. There was totally the opportunity there for him to try and go side by side and try and hold things from the outside, but it just wouldn't have worked. Or if he tried to commit too much to it, he would have risked his own neck for it. In through turn 11. Out through Pouon. And Bright has really yet to falter under the pressure here. It's not easy being the one defending for position, especially knowing the kind of driver you're facing up against. But Bright is confident. He doesn't buckle or yield like we've seen in some other instances of fighting here. Defense usually is a one-way avenue, because it's a case for, especially when we see with more experienced drivers like we see from Candarella, that they have this strategy where they just sit there and become this very oppressive part of the background for the driver in front. They're constantly pressuring them until they make a mistake and then they slip through. We find right now, though, this is among the more confident performances from Bright. Just a quick word, though, because yellow flags are out. It's for Vermac, the 888 in trouble as he gets back up and running. And there was trouble for him off the exit of turn 11. He drops in behind Mario Rutias now to 15th place. And Bright currently hugs the racing line. There is the opportunity here for Candarella to try and go for a bit of a Hail Mary send for the inside, but again, would have been far too risky. You're playing off of everyone else's sensibilities when you're in the defender's seat. And often we find those frayed tensions between drivers when you get these drivers who are very assertive in their overtaking strategy. They're very elbows out on the approach. And you have drivers who will almost gamble with what their sensibilities look like in an overtake. We see, though, now for Candarella, after a bit of an awkward run for that of Nick Bright, down through Oruj and Radion. And he now falters from position. So that's exactly the strategy Candarella was adopting there. He was having great consistent performance, just chipping away, hoping once Bright throws the kitchen sink at him, he'll run out of options and make a mistake. We also got word there from the pit lane was, looking there, I think it was Bas Pieters Fiem. Yes, no, sorry, not Bas Pieters Fiem. Jan Willem Bos, the number 100, into the pit lane and now out of this race. Meanwhile, in the pit lane, Brooklyn Donkin and Tyler Vermaak. See for Vermaak, more damage there after his incident at turn 11, which we caught the trailing end of as he got back onto the track. For Donkin, squeaky clean on the Mercedes for the time being. Into his pit box he goes, though, undercutting the current strategy by about 9 minutes here. So we've seen Donkin does like to go in for the pit lane a little bit earlier, give himself a longer second stint of a one-stop race. We'll see what he makes of it over the course of today's event, though. 53, just under 54 minutes left to go. The most recent battling we've seen then between Bright and Candarella is about to have a follow-up chapter with the arrival of Giovanni Ciulla on his first drive of the season for Ford. Otherwise, looking back up at the front, it's been a brutally consistent performance by these two here. Daniel Homoki and Francesco Panebianco. Porsche and Mercedes not a foot wrong since the race start. These two inseparable by less than 2 seconds from each other for the greater bulk of today's race. They have held this in a very close stead for the race lead. Harris also in a formidable performance, surfing through the madness that prevailed over the first couple of laps to find himself in a third place spot, now defending away from last season's champion Levi Warner in the number 1 Mustang. Brand new livery as well, should point that one out. I think we did earlier in the stream, but new coat of paint there on the number 1. As it stands to be the case, then Candarella in 5th, Bright 6th, Ciulla 7th. Bas Pieters Fiem currently in 8th. You see there that Eric Stander has unlapped himself. At least one occasion here of such from Pieters Fiem. John Williams 9th. Niels Basler rounds out the top 10. An extended stay in the pit lane then for Tyler Vermaak, of course, nursing damages on his McLaren. We see for the other driver that was in the pit lane with him, Brooklyn Donkin, now back out on track off the exit of turn 11. Closest current gap then between two drivers and furthest up the field, I should point out as well. Giovanni Ciulla versus Nick Bright, a fight between the Mustangs. We'll catch on with them in a moment's time, but taking a quick glance here around the rest of the field. Moreover, also to see here, if we are about to see a new attendee to the pit lane, Daniel Hatton stays out. I'd say we're a little too early in the conversations, though, for more of those pit lane runs. We'll have to see that coming up in about, looking here, the scope of 7 minutes. On board then with Giovanni Ciulla and his latest escapades to fight for 6th. And one does wonder then, of course, with the only temporary nature of the Joker when it comes to the fact that it won't carry over into another season. The Joker system will get reset and they'll still have one more Joker to play into season 11. Is this perhaps the start of a next step here for Giovanni Ciulla? He spent the greater bulk of his time with Ferrari, and this still has yielded for him some solid results throughout the season, even so much as a race win in round 7 of the championship. I believe that was in our visit to, I want to say, Laguna Seca now, looking back through it, as it's been such a long season. And yes, that was the case there. For his win in Seca, is it perhaps then a time for a change of pace? More on that in a moment, though. Yellow flags out off the exit of turn 9. It's the number 323, Gijs Bruce, in the wall with Ferrari. Looks like big trouble for him here as he finds himself dragging the wall, trying to locate a driver nearby to him to maybe assess the damages here. That 323 in big trouble. Chris Harris now in the pit lane during this time, and trying to look in here to find the current state of that Ferrari there. You can see for Gijs Bruce limping his way down to turn 10. It's been a big hit for him down at Le Common Melbourne. You can see the state there of that Ferrari, with the yellow flags still out here in sector 1. Number 17 gets up past him, and there goes Brooklyn Donkin. But I think it might be a case here, looking, the car's just rolling in think it is in gear. Oh, yeah, just another hit there from the wall. I think that might very well be the end of the road here for Guy Spruce. The 323 Ferrari, latest casualty here in Spa. The yellow flags will stay out until his car can be cleared from the track. We see here approaching that yellow flag. You can see the Ferrari stranded off at turn 10. The fight between the Fords of Bright and Chula. And as these drivers round into Sector 2, that is green flags for them, but it will remain as a yellow flag down in Sector 1. Technically, actually, sorry, the start of Sector 2. Been a confident performance today, though, from the number 6. Still holds on to a top 5 spot right now. As looking further up the order, with that recent attendance to the pit lane, Harris now in and about to come out of the pit lane as he drops from his jacks. Currently re-emerging behind that of Daniel Hatton, so coming into 12th place onto his second and last stint of today. Harris, very confident race from as well. Right now, 1.3 seconds from Giovanni Chula through Blanchimont. We noticed a few instances of it here and there. Now, we, of course, don't know for certain the affinity of drivers with every type of machine, but we're just gauging it off of the body language of the car, what we're seeing the drivers get up to. But if I had to make somewhat of an assessment here, as Levi Warner now in the pit lane promotes Giovanni Chula to the top 5, I've noted as well with Chula, he's been a lot more handsy with the curbs since his move to Ford away from Ferrari. Now, he was quite a frequent visitor to the curbs every now and again with Ferrari over the course of multiple races, but here, especially on a track like this, he's found himself on more occasions than not then clipping up over those curbs, perhaps still trying to test the waters here on what that Ford can give him in the long run. Of course, we mentioned it earlier in the stream, but the Ford is one of the better cars for attacking the curbs. You can be a lot more forward, a lot more aggressive with the Mustang than you can be with the Ferrari or the McLaren. And I think that is what we are seeing, at least in part of here, with Giovanni Chula, and a bit more of a hands-on approach to the curbs as we do now approach down in towards that area with the yellow flags, as again, Guy Spruce has yet to be recovered by any current salvage teams. In the pit lane as well is Niels Basler. We also got word there was an incident down at turn 19 and 20 a few moments ago. Sadly, the number 12 of Eric Stander is now officially out of round 10. After re-emerging to the pits following his incident on the Kemmel with Tyler Vermack, he's now out. In the pit lane then, Warner, Basler and Rutias. We of course saw their incident not too long ago, down at turn 11 where Basler was turned around after trying to go around the outside on Mario Rutias. Francesco Panabianco, it's worth pointing out here, has had a little bit more power up his sleeve this entire time, a little bit more oomph, as you could say, in his pursuit of the lead. As we go to catch on board with the Mercedes, fighting for the lead now. He reels in Homoki by less than a second, just drops into over a second, now back into less as we go in towards turns 19 and 20. Do either of them pull the trigger for a pit lane run? Homoki does. Panabianco stays out. Homoki then undercuts his pit strategy by about a minute and a half. Of course, if he stayed out, he would have been late onto the strategy. So it's a bit of a catch-22 there for the triple for the race lead. Now former race lead for the time being into the pit lane after a flawless 19 laps of racing. Francesco Panabianco stays out then and takes the lead of round 10. With that recent bit of news, then we also see plenty more attendees to the pit lane. Gianluca Candarella is in, as well as Nick Bright and Giovanni Chula. Now making 4 drivers entering the pits, as it stands to be the case right now. 2 drivers about to exit. Niels Basler just off the line there, out of the limiters and up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Mario Rutias short to join him. See there for Bas Petersveen, John Williams, they stay out. Daniel Hatton would be next on considerations for a pit lane run. For Chris Harris, this could still represent his chances to re-emerge in a top 5, but he is a long distance from it at this time here. It is worth pointing out as well, was fighting for a moment there with Levi Warner now back up and ahead of him to 9th place between these two, as they make their way on towards the run of things here at Blanchimont off the curb of Paul Frere at turn 16. 45 minutes left to go, so we're coming up on the halfway mark of the race today. And you'll note that our timing equipment is a few seconds slow, I believe is the term for it.
We are halfway through. Keep it up.
And as we mentioned, they're about 6 seconds, roughly. Omoki still yet to drop from his jacks. We see just how close Bright and Chula are, and this could be a race for them in the pit lane, depending on how quickly they want to gauge this here. It is worth pointing out that, yes, it's 25 seconds on fixed refueling. Candarella gets back out in front of them, but you can add an additional 5 seconds to take new tyres. And it seems to be the case where these two have mimicked each other's strategy, whether that was to take tyres or to not. I think in the case of most drivers, they'd much rather take on an extra set of Pirellis before the end of this race than serve with the benefit of that rather than the detriment of them later. Up in front of them now goes both that of Levi Warner and Chris Harris. So it's worth pointing out here, the strategy has been grand here for Chris Harris. And we'll see him back up to a very high position among the grid right now. We see the 828 being overtaken by Levi Warner. So Candarella currently holds ground between the two Fords, as we now get word that Francesco Panebianco is in the pit lane. The 667 that stayed out 1 lap longer than Daniel Homoki with Porsche is now in himself to the paddock. We have word as well, the 323 is back up and operational, barely though, as we make our way in through to Blanchimont. We saw there, that was the, I believe, the 888, yes it was, of Tyler Vermack on our screens, but now we see here the 323. Guy Spruce, now multiple laps down, has got control of the car just about enough here to find his way towards the pit lane, but I imagine this is going to be an awkward one for him, and yes. There's that patch of grass there, and we saw it can cause the car to step out quite violently once you catch it. Also in the pit lane then goes John Williams. You see for Daniel Homoki off the exit of the curb of Paul Frere. This is going to be close between himself and Francesco Panebianco. These two, the leading pair of this race, and have reigned over this grid of drivers just over half of the length of the race. Stands to be the case then for Bas Peter Sveen. Oh, trouble there. And I believe that's Vermack and Hatton. Yes. Going to catch on board here. Tyler Vermack back into the pits. That could be the end of his race today. Very likely to be the case. Same story for Daniel Hatton. An incident up at turn 6 onto the Kemmel straight. That's Vermack's second time being collected in an incident there on the Kemmel in today's event. This time, sadly, we don't know exactly what happened or how it started. But we are seeing how it ended, and it's with both drivers likely then out of round 10. Homoki on his way towards turn 2, as we have got word that Panebianco has now just left the pit lane. It's going to be close, but it looks to be the case here. Francesco Panebianco has the lead over Daniel Homoki, but by how much longer? You could see in the blur in the background was the lights of the Porsche, and emerging from turn 6 now to go side by side, tenfold the momentum of the Merc. The Porsche looks to get back up into the lead of this. It is worth pointing out Bas Peter Sveen technically holds the race lead right now, but under strategy, Homoki back out in front of Panebianco, but the gap is micro between them. With Williams in the pit lane, Warner moves back up to a possible podium position. Harris and Candarella in tow. It's worth pointing out in the case of Chris Harris, got back up and ahead of Gianluca Candarella in the 828 Ferrari. The 660 Ford now sets his sights on the number 1 in front. Warner has to take it in whilst it lasts here, because it will be the last race he holds that number 1 in line with traditional motorsports rules. He will be shedding that number 1 on the run in towards season 11. That will likely then be given over. That's if he chooses to take it. Of course, it is of their own volition. That could soon adorn this one here, the number 828 of Gianluca Candarella. Many questions then surrounding what will be his choice of vehicle. I'd have a pretty sizable chance at assuming that it would be Ferrari here. It's really a case of if it's not broke, don't fix it. But we have seen champions get a little bit more creative with their choices after a championship title. Matthew Williams being one of the best examples of it. If you take a look back through the last couple of champions in this series, you would have seen that he swapped between 3 different manufacturers on his triple header of championship titles. Started his first championship run with Ferrari, then moved to Ford the season after that, then moved to McLaren the season after that. Candarella, though, will he stay in with Ferrari? I'd say likely. Very likely to be a case here. Things have been going very swell between himself and Ferrari over the course of this championship. Their first win as a manufacturer in multiple seasons now. Their last championship coming in season 5 with Williams. Up in front, though, just want to point this out. These two still not distant from one another. And that fight for the race lead that we saw at the start of this race, he's firmly back on, albeit right now for what is standing as second, as Bas Petersveen holds out as the last driver to see the pit lane. Heading up through Eau Rouge and Radion, just firing their way uphill there. The two Fords of Warner and Harris, trailed by the Ferrari of Candarella. I'd say it's definitely worth going to catch on board with these three at this time. Back on board with the one trailing the mix here. On with that of Gianluca Candarella. We are still taking firm note, though, of the fight between the 667 and the 444. Which actually, as of right now, looks to be escalating. You see here, Francesco Panebianco versus Daniel Homoki. And this is to be for the provisional lead of this race, as the number 24 likely to see the pit lanes in the next couple of laps. On board with the AMG, Panebianco has waited far too long here for the opportunity to emerge as a race winner. 38 minutes stand between himself and the checkered flag, and with the 24 staying out, they still hold on to what is going to be a fight right now for second place. Strategically speaking, this is for the lead once Bas Petersveen comes into the pits. After a bit of an upset there at turns 15 and 16, Panebianco loses ground. Going to catch back in then with the Fords in their current triple header fight with Ferrari for 4th place. We have another set of yellow flags emerge for the same car as before. The 323 of Guy Spruce in trouble. Now down off the exit of turn 12. Watching here with Chris Harris, fighting in the middle of it all. Making our way up towards turn 19 and 20 there. So Harris very deep onto the brakes to try and hold off the advance there by Ferrari from behind. Candarella still in pursuit. And of course, all of these sights currently set then on the number 1. We see, though, for Harris, a less than ideal exit off of turn 20. Right now, as it stands to be the case, Candarella right up and alongside him now on the inside and ahead off of turn 1. We'll see, though, this is the perilous ascent uphill that has plagued the minds of drivers over the course of this day. And over the course of over a century's worth of history, Eau Rouge and Radion. Good exit there by the Ford, tapping into some of its extra top end there. Stay with Ferrari on the Kemmel. You see there, though, reluctantly for Chris Harris, caught in the dirty air and without a line there on his run through turns 7, 8 and 9. Back on with Panebianco. We've seen plenty of this fight from the attacker's point of view. Shortly we'll go to catch in with the defenders. So you see there a little bit of a wobble through turn 12 for Daniel Homoki. And catching on board here with the defender's angle of things, on with the Porsche number 444. Formerly a driver for Ferrari himself this season, Daniel Homoki. Really settling in nicely with Porsche after playing his joker earlier this season. Down through turn 15. Number 24, it's worth pointing out, has stayed out for yet another lap onto lap 23. A curious case then for Bas Petersveen, the number 24, currently 38.5 seconds in the lead, still yet to have served his pit stop. When he does, that will promote Homoki back up to the race lead. Right now, he finds himself fighting for second. That might be the most ferocious sound you'll hear from a Porsche in the modern era. 4.2 litre, flat 6. Symphony on 6 cylinders there. Historically speaking, there have been 2 manufacturers to really own that platform. Head and shoulders above the rest for the Boxer engine. That's been Subaru and Porsche. And they have 2 broadly distinctive notes. And much like we spoke about with Audi and the V10, you'll know if a Porsche's at a track day near you because you'll be hearing it for miles before you see it. up through Eau Rouge and Raidillon. That sound loud enough to rattle the teeth out of your head there. In towards turns 7, 8 and 9. Homoki still holds ground here from Panabianco. Now only 37 seconds in front of them is Bas Petersveen. Slowly but surely reeling in that Ferrari, who still has to come to the pits at some point this race. 34, just under 35 minutes left to go. Right now, we are aware of a fight going on for Levi Warner, I believe it is at this time. Going to look in to see with the #1 Mustang here. Warner versus Candarella. Of course, the battle among last two seasons' champions. Now, Season 10's champion goes toe-to-toe with Season 9's champion. A changing of the guard, some could say here, between Levi Warner and Gianluca Candarella in the fight for 4th place. Heading up towards Blanchimont. On board then with Levi Warner. Defending away from Gianluca Candarella. See for Candarella, he tries to go centre mass of the road because it will give him just ever so slightly more of a racing line over that full on the inside line we see down through turns 19 and 20 from Warner. Down through La Source, very wide to the right-hand side, and that specifically for this reason. So he could just swing in towards turn 1, carry just as much momentum as the Ford. All of this is in efforts to stay in the slipstream for the run-up through Eau Rouge and Raidillon. He knows physics is to his aid with a better centre of rotation on that Ferrari, who have fewer issues rotating in towards this run uphill. Both of them still forcing themselves up through Eau Rouge and Raidillon, off through turn 6, onto the Kemmel. You can see gluing himself to that right-hand side. Millimeters between himself and the grass that confines the edge of the track. All in efforts to stave off any possibility for a run on the inside there by Gianluca Candarella. Very stern defense then by Warner. Next season you'll be seeing those stars on Candarella's nameplate as the Season 10 champion. Meanwhile, just to address then the now, Bas Petersveen has come into the pit lane, the number 24 having pit some time ago whilst we watched on with this fight, currently for what is now emerged away from 4th to 3rd between these two. As Daniel Homoki continues to lead over Francesco Panabianco as we drop in closer to the last half hour of racing here in the circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. We are witnessing a fight on 2 rows here. Panabianco v Homoki for the race lead, and for the last of the podiums then, we have a fight among champions. Warner versus Candarella. Rounding out the top 5 and about to get into a fight himself here looks to be Chris Harris versus Nick Bright. Bright in 6th with Chula currently 7th by 9/10. Donkin in 8th, Petersveen in 9th, Williams in 10th, Bassler in 11th, Thomas 12th, Cheeseman 13th, Rutias 14th, and Geisbruce in 15th. Multiple DNFs off the start of today's race here. A very brutal final round for Season 10. Going around the outside, then you can see just clips all the way in to a super sharp line there. These V-shaped lines down through the almost double hairpin styled chicane we see there. Down at the bus stop chicane. Brings Gianluca Candarella to alongside Levi Warner, but we saw there just drops away from being on the outside line. Goes back in right behind us. So a bit of a misdirection tactic here, possibly from the 828 to try and throw the number 1 off of the usual rhythm of defense. Heading up through Eau Rouge and Raidillon, it's worth pointing out their squabbling has brought Harris and Bright into the mix here on what is upcoming to be a four-way, possibly five-way fight for third place. At the head of it, though, 3 championships worth of driver fighting for third. And while I'll not confirm anything right now, as we're watching on with this fight, I just have received a rather curious bit of news in the world of esports. Now, I'm not sure of how much liberty I am to divulge about the A, efficacy of their current agreement, or B, if there will be this proper transfer in the next couple of weeks. But I'll leave this up to you as somewhat of a, I wouldn't say a riddle, I'm not good at doing riddles, but a very reputable driver who has defined the course of quite a fair deal of history in one of our series that we've covered here on TRTN, has just signed, or possibly signed, or is in negotiations of signing, as we keep our options open, to 5-Star Esports. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say who. But something is brewing over at that team. And we'll keep an ear to the ground on that one. And when we get an official update on that, you'll be first to know about it. Heading down through Arouge and Radion, Levi Warner has so far held the line here against Gianluca Candarella. It has brought things into a 3-car crunch on the run up to Arouge and Radion, with Harris now in the mix. Bright out back there with Chula in pursuits. That Ferrari sandwiched in amongst a pack of Fords here up through Arouge and Radion. Warner still holding his ground, but you can see the Candarella almost kissing the rear bumper now with his Ferrari heading up. The Kemmel Straight is finally to the inside here. He's really going to have to commit to this one. Real gung-ho approach to things. Warner dives back out onto the racing line, squeezing him to the left-hand side of the track. Gianluca Candarella continues to go side by side, now to the inside, down at Melmedy. Can Warner hope for a switchback here on the Ferrari? It was so nearly contact between the pair, looking for the inside, but now his strategy is used against him. Gianluca Candarella moves to third, mistaken for Giovanni Chula. He's only a few cars behind, I should point out, in that white and yellow Ford, just behind the purple Ford of Nick Bright and the green Ford of Chris Harris. There's this one here, the blue, black and green Ford of Levi Warner, just to have lost third place there to Gianluca Candarella. What was the mother of all overtakes down at Lacombe and Melmedy, super close to each other on the run all the way down there. That was proper wheel-to-wheel stuff. Cutting away then from their fight to go and catch on with any further updates from the front lines here. Daniel Hoboki, half a second in the clear from Francesco Panebianco. This is still, I would say, in his case, a little too close for comfort on his defense of the race lead. Down through to turns 19 and 20 at the bus stop chicane. Mercedes still in pursuits here over Porsche. Homoki looking for his first win of the season. Same story here for Panebianco. Historically speaking, looking back to the last wins between these two, Daniel Homoki's last win came at Season 9, Round 9 at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. As for Francesco Panebianco, his was Season 9, Round 8. So both of these drivers here in the closing round of Season 10 looking to break the tie off of what has been nearly a full season's worth. Actually, it's just been a little over a full season's worth of a win drought. But who does it boil down to here? Will it be Homoki? Will it be Panebianco? 25.5 seconds will reveal to us the answer to that very conundrum. Taking a look in behind, though, to see for Candarella. Well, yes, he's broken away from Warner. Warner's not out of the forest just yet because he finds himself as part of a 4 Ford pack. for 4th place. So to put bluntly, we have 4 Fords in a 4 Ford car pack fighting for 4th. Stay with me here. You see then, recent among the fight of the Fords is Bright versus Chula. Very nearly was the opportunity there for an overtake. We did just get word of another disconnect there from one of our viewers in chat. You see Chula going for the inside at Puon here. Bright has to hold the outside as he falls back in behind Giovanni Chula. So nearly there, contact between the pair of them as they come out through turn 12, carrying a lot of steam with them there on the run up towards turn 13 and 14 at Campus. The 36 still right on with there, the number 10 of Giovanni Chula. As we continue our pursuits down through this section here, you wouldn't be mistaken in assuming this was something of the Ford Challenge we're seeing here. Albeit a little bit more juiced up than what we get in the Mustang GT4. The GT3 then, an absolute titan of the modern meta. We see for Harris, looking to get up and ahead here of Warner, side by side down through to Blanchimont. This could end in tears between the pair of them as they barrel through turn 18, way out wide as the number 1 slides, holds his ground. Giovanni Chula serves up around the outside here to try and deliver on what could very well be the makings of a double overtake with the likes there of Harris in sight, but Harris cuts him off. Out at turn 20 then, Giovanni Chula up and ahead then of Levi Warner. Same story for Harris, now up and ahead of Warner. So Chula to 5th, Harris to 4th, Warner to 6th, Bright 7th. We see there for Bright, gets his elbows out on a run in towards La Source. A little bit of a bump between himself and Levi Warner. Warner gets back out in front of him there to 6th. And this has been a very, very unique little chapter here. Not to overshadow the fight of the race lead, of course, still going on as they exit through Lacombe and Melmody. But let's go to catch on board with the fight of the Fords here. Giovanni Chula looking to emerge to 4th. Looking for the inside then, but has he got the braking distance over Harris? Unlikely there. That was very close to the line between both drivers. The 660 to a T there at turn 7. A little bit of a bump off of the very high curbs on the inside there at turn 9. Chula has a look for the inside at Bruxelles. But there we see a little bump between these two. Bit of touring car level camaraderie between Chula and Harris. Down through to turn 11. Number 10 still in pursuit here. Harris attempting to stave him off. You see though for Giovanni Chula, that 2nd and 3rd sector is really where he comes alive. We'll see what he can make of it. On the run now out through Puon in towards turns 13 and 14 at Campus. Later then to Stabilo at turn 15. Updates from the front lines as the gap continues to build between Homoki and Panabianco. We're watching here the fight of 4th place between Giovanni Chula and Chris Harris. Behind them, Levi Warner and Nick Bright contend for 6th. "22 minutes left to go then here in Spa. What has been a brilliant outro to this series here in Season 10 of the FATCH GT GT3 series. And we relayed the message earlier in this live stream, but for those just joining us now, Season 11 has been confirmed and sign-ups will begin in, I'd say, I think it's the next couple of days to next couple of weeks here. So I've been told, we've not been given an exact time frame, but what we have been told, Season 11 is coming. And the sign-ups will, for the first couple of days when they open, be exclusive to the FATCH GT Discord server. Later then we'll open up fully onto SimGrid. If you're hungry for more racing action, then you'll be live with us tomorrow as we get into the final round of the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup. Sadly, nothing coming up then on Wednesday, as of course last week we wrapped up Season 3 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, and we also wrapped up Season 11 of VSR, so nothing coming up this Wednesday, or this Thursday, or this Friday. Our next bit of action, I believe, is coming up on Saturday as we get back in with the High Caliber Community League Multi-Class Championship. And then, of course, coming up on Sunday this week will be Round 3 of Season 6 of the NLRL Sunday League. After what has been a fantastic opening 2 rounds from here at Spa for Round 1, later to Indianapolis at Round 2. It's given us quite a few twists and turns along the way. And after that second round in Indy, we have noted as well that Tyler Vermaak is now leading in the Drivers' Championship after his brilliant performance in Indianapolis. Here, though, in FATCH GT, the championship was already wrapped up last week in Snetterton for Gianluca Candarella. Becomes the first Italian driver to ever take the championship win here in this series. We see here with his teammate at the Phoenix Racing team, Giovanni Ciulla, who played his joker tonight, started from the back of the field, currently among the top 5, fighting for 4th against Chris Harris, who I would say has been really up there as one of the up-and-coming talents of this season. We see right now really getting handsy to the rear bumper of Harris is Giovanni Ciulla. We, in fact, almost saw there, I could have sworn I saw the Ford lift. The back end of the car lift a little bit there with the contact between turns 15 and 16. Behind them is Warner and Bright. Last season's champion, Levi Warner, now 2-time champ in FATCH GT. Up in front there, you see Ciulla trying to look for the inside off of Harris. Very late on the anchors, there goes Warner, runs a bit deep into turn 19. Bright right behind him, still looking for an opportunity of an overtake. We see among these two drivers, Ciulla and Warner are two very, I would say, very up-and-coming talents for this grid. Has been Nick Bright and Chris Harris. Up in front, though, we see Harris now being harassed for position as Giovanni Ciulla really starts to get his elbows out now as we drop into the last 20 minutes of racing. Side by side, a little bit of a bump at La Source. Now up through to Eau Rouge and Raidillon. Getting up through turns 3, 4, and 5, and behind them, Warner and Bright now reeling in here on Harris. And it's a bump draft. It's a bit cheeky, I will say that much there from Levi Warner, giving Chris Harris a bump draft on the Kemmel. I mean, it takes some serious guts to do that, given ACC's collision model and its affinity for annihilating drivers off the slightest of contacts. I'd say they've got a bit of a running race here with the Codemasters F1 games on who can get their car annihilated easier. It's weird as well when you consider it for Assetto Corsa Competizione, because Assetto Corsa, for all of its, flaws on console, had a really good collision model going for it. When I did touring car racing and cup car racing there, you could routinely bump draft and it wasn't much of an issue. So long as you were within, I'd say not a few milliseconds, I'd say about a tenth of a second on the ping. If you were within 100 milliseconds, you were perfectly fine to do that. And we would be bump drafting each other like it was the British Touring Car Championship. But here on it, ACC, that's a rare thing to see and not see a opportunity there where Harris could have been cannons to the wall off the slightest of contact. But fair enough, we're all here for it. If we're starting to see more bump drafting, I'm absolutely here for it. That's old school. Off the exit of turn 15 and turn 16. Now we're going to go catch back on board here with the fight for the lead as it has started to heat up between these two. Very close to each other now on board with Francesco Panebianco and Daniel Homoki, looking to break what has been over a season's worth of win drought in tonight's event. Both of them having last seen victories in rounds 8 and 9 of season 9 of FATCH GT. Homoki has put on a proper show tonight. Panebianco has been a very close equal to him. These two drivers now in somewhat of an old western draw to see who slips up first. Just under 17 minutes left to go here in Spa. Back on then with the fight of the Fords as we now see the case here. Levi Warner on the inside of Chris Harris. Nick Bright following with Giovanni Ciulla now about 3 seconds up in front of them. We now see there just off in the distance him heading up through Eau Rouge and Raidillon. It's now 3 Fords in contention, rising up through turns 3, 4 and 5. Harris forced to cut. Bright had that one pretty well nailed in, I'd say. Off the exit of turn 6 onto the Kemmel. All of them in a slipstream train now. This is just absolute music to our ears. Thunder from those 5.4s. You'd not be mistaken in closing your eyes here and thinking this was some what of NASCAR we're seeing here, but this is just a brilliant soundtrack off of these 3 cars. And when it was upwards of that 4, maybe even 5 car pack at one point, it was something of, I'd say, history in this series to see Ford battle so closely with each other. Of course, I'd say probably the most popular car as of right now on ACC, the 7th gen Mustang, has had quite the rise in the real world, of course. It's been on the up and up here. GTD Pro, they've been taking wins over on IMSA this year. We reported on earlier in our broadcast month of May. I'd say the Mustang project still has a lot of ground to cover before it can stand 10 toes alongside the, I'd say, last legendary Ford endurance race of the Ford GT. Or I suppose more relevantly speaking, the GT40. But it is still getting up there very, very quickly. We see here now almost neck and neck here. Panabianco v Homoki. The last quarter of an hour descends upon these two. And as the sun is firmly yonder the horizon on both the championship and today's event, we are in for about a quarter of an hour's worth of nighttime racing in proper between these two. 0.2 of a second as they rise up to Eau Rouge and Raidillon. You heard there from the Mercedes, not a single lift at all there as he caned the throttle straight to the floor. He finds himself again just straggling behind the Ford when it comes to, not the Ford, sorry, the Porsche. Odd looking Ford, if you ask me. The Porsche for straight line speed. And that's a rare thing to consider because when we take a look at this chart here for top end speed, now this was of course taken over in Monza, but you find right now, well, I suppose it's not particularly relevant, but where we can point this out, Mercedes finds themselves in the chunk with Bentley, Aston Martin and McLaren. Porsche finds himself actually behind at 170 miles per hour. So the fact that the Porsche has been able to hold that margin up over Mercedes has been a very remarkable thing indeed. We see running out wide there was Mario Urutiz, not to stand in the way of this fight for the lead as it does look to go nuclear between these two. Tensions now white hot between these two. The 667 versus the 444. As we see there, wiggling around in towards Stavolo. Panabianco couldn't make his mind up. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I stay on the racing line? Off the exit of turn 16 at the curve of Paul Frere. Still in the slipstream on the Porsche. 13 minutes left to go. Time is ticking for these two. We're, I'd say, roughly in the prospectus now for about 6 more laps of racing before we're finished here in Spa. And for one of these two drivers, they'll break over a season's worth of wind drought in tonight's event. Panabianco, he has hunted this one down all season and now finds himself at the rear quarter of the Porsche of Daniel Homoki. Homoki was within the chances not too long ago in Kyalami, but it was heartbreak on the start line as he disconnected from the field. Both of these drivers having met now at the midway point. Will contend for one possible win here tonight. And this has given us, I will say, probably one of the most epic fights for a race win I think we've seen all season. I would even go as far to say in my time as a commentator of all time that we've seen on TRTN. Oh, it's contact though. Very late onto the brakes goes Panabianco, and he collects Homoki down at turn 7 and 8. If they hang around for much longer, Gianluca Candarella will be in range. As they round out through turn 9. The problem with tensions here, they will eventually hit somewhat of a breaking point, and that was it for these two. 0.7 of a second damage to the rear of Daniel Homoki, though not significant enough to warrant a pit lane run, but it could have an effect on him. We'll catch on with them later on. Let's go to find our Fords and see what's going on with that pack of cars we were previously on board with. Gave us quite a bit of theatrics here, as we now see from that of Levi Warner. Holds a second over Chris Harris and 7 seconds over Nick Bright. Now having just exited turn 9, we see here the number 1 down through turn 10. Giovanni Chula 6.5 seconds in the lead over these three. But Harris still clings to the margins of a top 5 finish here. The fact that Harris has had to contend already with last season's champion and a 2-time champion in his own respect, Levi Warner, as well as this season's champion, Gianluca Candarella, to try and hold even a crumb of that top 5, and has still held out strong all the way to the end of today's race, has been quite the making of the 660. Has been a proper trooper in this race. We see there up in front, Good things come to those who wait, because up in the top 5 goes Chris Harris after a big wobble there for the number 1 of Levi Warner. He drops in now behind after the exit of Campus into Stavilo, into the curb of Paul Frere. Thereafter, Harris rises to the top 5. I think it was there, just a bit of an aggressive tackle on the curbs, upset the balance on the number 1, and he wobbles down through Campus, ultimately kicking the door wide open for the 660 to move into the top 5. Out through Blanchimont. We'll catch on with these a little later on here, just checking on through them. We see here for Brooklyn Donkin, he started towards the back on this grid. Finds himself in the top 10 at the moment, 8th, about 21 seconds from the Fords up in front of him. Himself holding just nearly 10 seconds off of Bas Petersveen behind. Panabianco still in pursuit. But now 0.6 of a second, a lot of that progress that he's worked towards in the last couple of laps has been reset after his incident down here at turn 7. Staying on board then with Francesco Panabianco, fighting for the lead from Daniel Hamoki. And shortly thereafter, we'll go to check in to see from the defender's point of view here with Hamoki. Panabianco getting closer and closer now, so he's brought himself back in on the same gap we saw before, just before their brief contact down at turn 7. Currently then in the prospect of about 3, I'd say 4 laps at a push here left to go. I think I'd say it's 4 with an overlap on that final lap there by about a minute before the end of this race. These two have seldom put a foot wrong. I think that contact down at Le Combe was really the first of it between either party over the course of this race. Near flawless driving before and now after between Hamoki and Panabianco at the head of the field. It's worth pointing out for them though, not far off from them in the distance. We'll possibly see their headlights as we go up through the hill at Eau Rouge and Radion. In pursuit to them by a few seconds behind. I think we just briefly saw them in the back was Gianluca Candarella by 8 seconds. Any more mistakes from this point onwards and Candarella's in range. And that's a frightening prospect when you consider that he started from plumb last along with the Jokers. And unlike the Jokers, he did it of his own volition. That's usually the scariest thing you can hear with a driver when they decide by themselves they're going to start from the back. Because that means you're going to get one of two things. You're either going to see that driver get wiped out in the first 5 laps, or you're about to see the most ferocious driving of the race. And so far, in the case of Candarella, it's been the latter. Panabianco now firmly on Hamoki. There is a yellow flag out, and it's off of Eau Rouge and Radion. So we can only assume the worst here for Levi Warner. Taking a brief glance, yes, the yellow flags are out off of turn 5, wiped out. Last season's champion, Levi Warner, possibly to be out of this race. Back on board then with our leading duo as their fighting picks up into another swing here. We watched with Panabianco, but let's go to catch on board with the defending angle of such. Looking to try and catch on board with the Porsche. Now holding ground away from Panabianco. On board with Daniel Hamoki. In towards turns 19 and 20. With Warner, I'm told now, having been delivered back to the pit lane, it's likely the case that the number one will not see the checkered flag. With only 5.5 minutes left to go here in Spa. A disastrous end then for him. We can only assume that he's either collected himself on the wall on the inside and bounced out wide, or he spun up the hill. So we see here, that one on the left-hand side likely is what caught him, as his car was stranded on what was the right-hand side of the track, just off the pit lane exit, when we caught on with him. Beyond a state of usable amount of damage, I'd say. The number one, regrettably then, out of this race. 5 minutes left to go then here in Spa. Catching in from behind then, the attacking car of two, Francesco Panebianco. We watched from the defender's angle, back in with the attacker here with the 667. Now, a frightening statistic indeed. Have a glance at the gap behind. 6.6 seconds and closing is Gianluca Candarella. Looking over the rear view of Francesco Panebianco. Once we get out onto the more open sections of the track, will reveal to us the sight of that Ferrari in pursuit of the lead. And with a bit of a wobble between turns 15 and 16, Panebianco scrapes more time away now. Now, by the looks of things here, about to come up to about half a second between himself and Daniel Homoki. Heading up through Blanchimont. See off in the background, just faintly in the distance, was the headlights of the 828. 6 seconds behind Panebianco, as it stands less than 7 seconds away from Homoki. And as they enter the penultimate lap of racing here in Spa, on lap 37, the end of this race could not come any sooner for either of these two here. Only 2 more laps, including this one, left to go. Panebianco, we're starting to see that the Mercedes, now having lost wind there from the Porsche, is fading. We'll need to hope here that he's got enough momentum to carry in through that first sector into second to get back up with the 444. As right now, the approach of that Ferrari, a very, very faint glimmer off in the distance there of that 828, seems all but inevitable. Had it been a slightly longer race today, these two would have been intercepted. Right now, they'll be running to the line, 0.4 of a second from each other. And as we mentioned before, one more slip up, and that's effectively going to be Candarella's race to win. Heading up through to turn 11. Another stab of oversteer. You can see that Panebianco rides right on the ragged edge for his Mercedes to keep himself in this fight with Daniel Homoki, who goes quite, I'd say, preemptively onto the brakes there. You can see almost a moment of panic from Panebianco down through to turn 12 at Pouhon. And this is going to go all the way down to the wire, I think, with these two, with how close they've held things so far. So we go to catch on board currently with the leading of two, then away from Panebianco and on once again with Daniel Homoki. Leading out through turn 16, but this could be a changing of the guard here. A bit of a wobble off exit of the curb of Paul Frere, and the Mercedes still right along with. This could go down to the wire on one last lap between these two. Going back in then with the Mercedes of Panebianco. As we go rocketing out through Blanchimont, the Porsche preemptively covers the inside at turn 19. They'll go side by side into the bus stop chicane as we head on to the last lap of racing here in the circuit to Spa-Francorchamps. They're still side by side off the exit of turn 20. Panebianco has the chance. The door is open for the 667. We're on the last lap. Down through to turn 1. He's still to the outside, but he's going to look here to try and go for a bit of a switchback line. It doesn't work so well for him, but he's still right along with. So the Kemmel is his next opportunity here as we rocket down through turn 2. It's all going to come down to the wire here between these two drivers. They've been hunting down this win for over a season. Up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Bianco still in pursuit on Homoki. He looks to have the momentum to carry. Now alongside on the Kemmel Straight, heading up to Lacombe and Melmonty. This is where their last incident was. It's worth pointing out. Are they going to find themselves in the likelihood to repeat history? Bianco still clings on with, but Homoki breaks away into turn 9. You can hear off in the distance the sound of that V6 snarling in the distance. Canderella is nearby. That should be plenty enough a warning sign for these two. The end of the race couldn't come soon enough for them. Heading in towards Pouon, Bianco throwing the kitchen sink now into this performance. His last race win, Season 9, Round 8. Down through to Campus here, turns 13 and 14. Porsche still holding the ground. This is worth pointing out from either party. This will be their manufacturer's first win of Season 10. On top of the first for their drivers. Out through the curb of Paul Frere. It's super close to hold here between these two. Cutting away to catch on board with Daniel Homoki. As this one could carry all the way down towards the line. It's still a who's who here as we run up towards Blanchimont. It has been a formidable drive between both drivers, but it still has to be one by one here at round 10. Heading up towards the run of things at the bus stop chicane. Daniel Homoki still holds the lead. Bianco runs from the outside at turn 19, then to turn 20. Muscles him out from the inside, down towards the line as the checkered flag flies. As it's going to be a drag race to the line. It's Bianco from Homoki to win in Spa. His first win since Season 9 Round 8 ends in a very controversial turn at turns 19 and 20. I'm still in a state of shock there after a victory like this. Bianco hunted this one down tooth and nail all season. It came down to frayed tensions and one tiny bout of contact at turn 19 and 20. Down to the wire with Homoki and Bianco. Better late than never. What a season it has been here on FATCH GT. We'll wait, though, for the full results to come through as we see there Canderella third with the fastest lap. I mean, what a turnaround that's been for him today. Started from the back. Same story for Chula, fourth. Harris, fifth. Bright in sixth. Donkin in seventh. Great turn for all of the back starters in this race. Bas Petersveen looking at eighth. Behind him, John Williams here. This could be down to the wire and all. Down to the line we go. Petersveen for eighth. Williams for ninth. Rounding out the top 10 then, two-time champion Niels Baslier. And the number 23 Ferrari to the line on the last race of the season. But what an ending that's been. I've never seen a race come down to the wire quite like this. Bianco versus Homoki. Remember that one in the history books for this series, because I don't think we're getting a fight quite like that again. At least not for a good while. Oh my word. This, and I say this without a shadow of doubt, is absolute cinema. Ben Cheeseman then to see the line. I believe with a few drivers having left here, we will wait for the full result to come through. Ken Thomas to the line now. And then last but not least, Gijs Bruce in the 3-2-3. A tough race for this one today, but the fact he held out in spite of what was catastrophic, I would say race-ending damage on that Ferrari, soldiered on through, was adamant to see the checkered flag here at the end of Season 10. 90 minutes of racing here in Spa have brought us forward. They're survivors. Looking at the full result then, by 3/10 and a bit of a bump on exit of turn 19 and 20. Francesco Bianco takes victory for the first time in over a season. His last victory was right here at Spa at Season 9 Round 8. Daniel Homoki second, Canderella third, Chula fourth, Harris fifth, Bright sixth, Donkin seventh, Petersveen in eighth, Williams ninth, Baslier rounds out the top 10. Cheeseman in 11th, Thomas in 12th, Rutias in 13th, and of the finishing drivers, technically 15th there for Gijs Bruce. Levi Warner, sadly a DNF in this race after catastrophic damages at the end of Eau Rouge and Radion. Also DNFs in this race, and it's an extensive list here. Verstappen, Hatton, Vermack, Boss, Delsman, Stander, Marquez, Reitveld, Colmus was a DNS, and same story for Simon Byrne. Of what started as a 25-car grid, boiled down to only 14 survivors, but it gave us what I would stand the grounds to say is one of the greatest final lap battles I've seen in years. And what an ending to the season it has been here from us here on TRTN. It has been, and I will hold this to the highest of regards, an absolute pleasure to work with the folks over at FATCH GT for them to have brought us in for this project as we find ourselves now concluding what has been 10 absolutely epic rounds of competition here in Season 10. And Season 11, of course, we confirmed earlier on today, is on the way. Make no mistake of it. We will be seeing Season 11 in the near future. We will be seeing FATCH GT again here on TRTN. Mark my words on that one. That's all from us here on TRTN. As mentioned before, we sadly won't be able to get an interview off of Candarella, respecting his wishes, though, as he doesn't feel comfortable coming on the microphone today. But nonetheless, that interview segment has been picked up by the folks over at FATCH GT, and we might have more of them to speak of heading in towards Season 11. More information on that, though, when we get to Season 11 sometime in the near future. We don't quite yet know, but sign-ups will be available for the first couple of days for FATCH GT Discord members only, and then we'll open out to the general public over on SimGrid. That's all from us here on TRTN. What a season it's been then here on FATCH GT. Of course, your Season 10 Drivers Champion has been Gianluca Candarella, but your round winner today, after a long, long last, is Francesco Panabianco. What a saga it's been then here for Season 10. I look forward then to seeing you again for Season 11 of FATCH GT's GT3 series. That's all from us here on TRTN. If you're joining us tomorrow, we round out yet another series, the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup, on the prelude in towards the next series of the GT Sprint Cup EU, heading in towards what is going to be Season 6 for them after the GT Manufacturers Cup wraps. That's all from us here today. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.